I'd like to just start off by having you guys introduce yourself, your company, and kind of what your product is. Christina?
Hello. So what we do, we are making the first pelvic floor trainers that are equipped with impedance sensors. So we give women vaginal changes, and they use it to conceive or monitor their cycles. So we have the first intimate monitor out there on the market. This is it.
Amazing. Thank you. Hi, I'm Anna. I'm the co-founder and head of engineering of Lioness. We're a smart vibrator that gives you biofeedback data on your orgasms and arousal. So I'm really excited to talk about vibrators at a sensors conference. I started as a mechanical engineer working at Amazon Lab 126. So it's really cool to kind of come back. So we do biofeedback. What we're measuring is involuntary pelvic floor contractions. It's one of the best indicators for arousal and orgasms. And then we work with researchers and doctors to expand the research around female sexual function and what things could be changing it all through a vibrator.
Hi, I'm Michelle Wispaway, COO and co-founder of FemTech Health. We are a digital telemedicine company for menopause management, perimenopause, and feminine longevity. And we develop customized and personalized treatment plans with a combination of AI genomic lab testing and data symptom analysis.
Thank you. So we're just going to kick it off by talking about women's health innovation industry, which is booming. Coined in 2016, FemTech paved the way for women's health to benefit from personalized health solutions. So I'd like to ask, what is the FemTech industry? What does it mean to you? And why is its development crucial to propelling women's health forward?
Anyone?
Okay, I can start. I don't know, can you hear me?
No.
No? Something is wrong? Better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think FemTech is very important because unlike health that was generally considered to be like male health only, we have a lot of specific conditions that are very specific to us as women. And it has been thriving recently a lot because a lot of women have been getting degrees in engineering, and now we have the capability to solve our problems. What we have done in our company, we were the first who actually were interested in changes in vagina on a chemical level, like what happens in vagina, how does it correlate to other symptoms that women have. And I was working in a tech, and every day when I was walking home past the sex store, I was always thinking, why the heck none of the sex toys is able to sense my medical data from vagina? Why? We have so many problems as a woman: vaginal dryness, painful sex, we have troubles in conception. There's so many things going on, prolapsed pelvic floors, and then nothing measures the changes of vagina. We have Fitbits, we have Oura Rings, we have sleeping technologies, but what about our vaginas? Like every half of the world is having them. So what we did, we put impedance sensors on pelvic floor trainers so we finally can shine light into the changes of vagina over time, and we give this data to women. And my friend, she's finally collecting data on orgasms, which I think is the biggest thing in the world. So what does FemTech mean to you, Anne?
So I think FemTech is really unique in the sense that it's a pretty small and it's very new. So when we started our company 8 years ago. The term sex tech wasn't coined as a term yet. So when we first started the company, trying to open a bank account, people were like, this is an adult pornographic company, we can't fund this company, we can't open a bank account. So there is a lot of things that's missing within FemTech. We often forget about sex tech. So when we look at FemTech, often we're looking at things like fertility, pregnancy, menopause, but we forget that sexual pleasure is a huge aspect of almost everybody's lives. So it's been really interesting to kind of see one, being in FemTech and then going specifically into sex tech. And I'll give like a really good anecdote for this, is that when I first started the company, I was scared of my own body. Like I didn't think that I would ever make a sex toy company. But I met this founder of a different sex toy company that doesn't exist anymore, and it was this guy, and I was like, how do you know what you're building works for people with vaginas or like women? And he was like, oh, there's this industry standard where you put the vibration on your nose, and that's what a clitoris feels like. And I remember just being like, oh my gosh, like the products that we've been building that are so, like we have so much tech and sensors, but the fact that we don't do any innovations in the sex toy space was just such a weird thing for me. And so for me, FemTech is important in just that we need to get more products out there that actually cater to people that aren't historically outdated, but then also just a reminder that sex tech can be a huge part of FemTech. And one of the really interesting things we've seen is, for example, if a guy goes in with erectile dysfunction into a hospital, the first thing they check for is cardiovascular disease, because they know that there's a correlation from health, for your health, overall health aspect. We don't have the similar things for women. A lot of times they'll be like, it's a mental illness, we don't know, your body change hormones. But we're trying to basically expand the understanding of how that data can actually we can understand women's health as a whole. So understanding how we can work with doctors and researchers to actually understand different parts of sexual function.
Yeah, and while for men, when they're not able to orgasm, it's considered a health problem.
Yeah.
For women, when they don't orgasm, it's considered, that's okay.
Yeah, it's mental, yeah.
So I think half of the world would agree with me. This is a huge opportunity, and let's put sensors on where it matters, really. So that's what we have been doing.
Yes.
Yeah, so health tech to me is really important because it's niched out, and we've started to finally, as women, be very empowering and create disruption in the market and have innovative solutions that are just tailored and more personalized. And I think the healthcare system, being in healthcare my entire career, has been really broken and conservative and rigid, and it doesn't allow doctors to think outside the box. It doesn't give options and resources and creativity and really allow women to be in tune with their body and what they need. And we have given women solutions. And as far as FemGevity, just being perimenopause and menopause and longevity focused, we give women this opportunity to redefine their aging and be predictive on extending their lifespan with various diseases that could come and shorten their lifespan. And we do that through a lot of data analytics with laboratory and symptom analysis. And there's nothing like that out on the market, especially in the healthcare system that's covered by insurance. And this FemTech industry has allowed us to take aging for women to the next level and not be scary and be about resilience and sexy and confidence. And it's okay if you're 45 and having hot flashes or vaginal dryness, because it doesn't have to be that way. There's ways to go through your journey of life to cure those symptoms. And it just brings just so many trailblazing opportunities for us to work together with product engineers and just a lot more tech founder collaborations.
Yeah, I think we all kind of touched on visualizing and discovering those gaps where women are concerned. So what critical factors should be assessed and or incorporated into the design and engineering process for women's health technology?
So first of all, you have to have real human subject testers. And I think that has been not a norm in a healthcare space for a long time. A lot of products that are meant for women have been tested on men. So the very first step that a FemTech brings as an innovation is mostly built by women. And so we test it and we make it for us. An example, okay? So my product vibrates, but it's also a medical device. And I came across so many men who asked me why it has to be in this shape and look like a dildo. Why does it have to vibrate? And I'm like, because guess what? User experience when using medical devices doesn't have to suck. It just can be also a really nice experience, you know? So just having a woman touch on the experience of how we use the product, which are medical for medical problems in women's health, also is very impactful how we treat women. So it's very, very important. Like when you take women into account in healthcare, but also in design and development, you create products that are actually very successful and women use them and like to use them.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like it really is. I think I have to emphasize how much when we say like women's health is underrepresented, and in FemTech, a lot of times like historically it's always been tested. Everything's been tested on men, which is not a bad thing, but I think we're missing a huge portion of stories. And it is things like that are products made for women often are tested on men first, which also just doesn't make sense. So I think what we're seeing is the emphasis of making sure that there's representation. And one of the things we say at Linus is that there is 1,000,000,003 ways people experience pleasure. And if you think about how outdated even just sex toys are as a thing, it's already so outdated. So we're kind of trying to see how we can expand that and see representation in the different types of people, different walks of life, different stages of life. So it's not even just about having like women representation, but it's also just different stages of life as just such a underrepresented. I have like countless stories of how research papers very often used to neglect testing on female mice, even for drug tests. And so because women have different hormone cycles, they didn't want to understand how that would affect the drug trial. So I would say historically, we've just been so backdated. And so it's figuring out how to kind of move forward from that.
Yeah, I think for us, and FemJevity isn't directly deal with products for sex and stimulation, but what we do is treat a lot of women for libido loss, and we increase it and bring it back, and a lot of it is drop in testosterone and estrogen levels, and the lack of just knowledge and education out there. And it's been very, like the lady said, R&D has always been for men, right? Tylenol and aspirin was if you go back into decades ago, it was tested on men, and there hasn't been enough out there to really give the standard and testing on bioidenticals and nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals, and having women go through the system and test it out and see how they feel is a really big driver. The other thing for us is because we're very service tech heavy, to have really great product engineers that also can understand growth marketing and incorporate and tie the two together is really a huge win for us personally, and I think a lot of other service tech, FemTech related companies.
So we kind of touched on the deficits of women in the research, but let's touch on now the deficits for women in funding. Women's health received only 4% of R&D funding for healthcare, yet our illnesses cost the economy hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Part of the reason is a lack of diversity in Silicon Valley. Founders are pitching products to investors who don't suffer from these ailments, nor do they understand the ailments. What are your experiences with fundraising as founders?
I could write a book about it.
It's a loaded question.
No, when I started the company, I was pitching this to investors, and I was telling them, every second person has vagina. We don't have any data on it. Women suffer, big problem. And he was like, yeah, it's a big problem, but to me it sounds like I'm supposed to shovel something up my ass. I'm like, okay, fine. So I think the problem in funding is that people like to fund something that they can feel, that it's their problem, that they can feel the pain. But men inherently, they can't feel our pain. They don't understand how big of a problem this is. And this change, essentially, I got funding mostly from women. And when we launched the product, it flew off the shelf, and we sold out and sold out and sold out. Many investors, they started to open eyes, and they were like, every second person has a vagina. Okay, it's a big, big, big market. It's a big problem. Painful sex is a big problem. The fact that we don't understand any of vaginal changes as we proceed with women is a big problem, because $35 billion in costs are associated with vaginal not correct function. So it's a huge, huge, huge problem. So finally, when we could back what we are doing with revenue, they started to open eyes, and they were like, wow, okay, maybe orgasms and good sex is more profitable than Tesla. And yeah, I think, you have to really prove something in our space before people with money understand it's a big problem. And I'm so happy that finally we are starting to be in a space where people see it's a big, big, big opportunity, not as we were framing it years ago when we started that, it's a big problem. now it's like a big cash opportunity for investors.
Yeah, I think it was definitely like, I think everyone can commiserate in that fundraising is an extremely difficult thing. And then when you're doing it in FemTech, where a lot of times you're talking to people about why women masturbate or what's important, how do women have orgasms, a lot of times they don't identify with that problem. Yeah. So I think in that, we both, when we started in the early days, and the idea that sex tech wasn't coined as a term, it was really, really hard to just do fundraising of like, hey, we're making this vibrator. And then it's usually feedback like, well, my wife doesn't need a vibrator. And I was like, no one's talking about your wife. Like, I'm talking about women generally, just everywhere.
And our LPs wouldn't agree with it.
Yeah, the LPs won't agree with. So there's a lot of backlash, I think. And it was very much starting from the proving a point through, we did an Indiegogo campaign when we first started, and we completely bootstrapped our company the first 2 years. And it was very much like, we're gonna build this out, we're gonna build a prototype, we're gonna partner with the manufacturer to show what we're building makes sense. And so we had to get that buy-in from Indiegogo campaign, and we oversubscribed in over 48 hours. So it's just showing a proof point that women are looking for products, but and a lot of times it's the stigma and taboo of being like, there's something wrong with me, and they don't wanna fix something that feels like it makes them not normal, but it really is just a lot of stigma that goes in it. But with that said, I will say like the great thing and the really positive thing is that it's in the 8 years I've seen this industry change. I think there's so much positive aspects of how much this is coming in the forefront. The fact that we're speaking at a Sensors Converge conference is so incredible to see that kind of take the front lead and showing that women are a huge buying power, they're a huge population, and there's not enough products. And so it's a really, if we're even just looking at it from like a money standpoint, like it is a huge industry that hasn't been tapped yet because there's so many needs that haven't been discovered. So for me, I'm feeling very hopeful, and it is just slowly continuing to break down the taboo of like, let's talk about women's health, like let's talk about women's sexual pleasure and orgasms like out loud without having to feel terrified of it.
Yeah, and I also, in my company, we talk about our future products and how we approach it, that we are targeting the silent majority, which is silent, but it's a majority. The fact that it's so normalized that women are silent when we have problems doesn't mean everyone has them. So I think it's just going to change very soon. There's going to be big exits in our space, and people finally will see like, wow, you know, we are changing it.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting is the FemTech industry is valued at $600 billion, and menopause alone carved out of there is valued at $16 billion. And I've found that, you know, you hear a lot, it's like, oh, the white male, he's not, you go to your VCs, and we're actually in a seed round right now, so we're living through this, and it's challenging and daunting and tiring, but also kind of exciting in a way. And menopause hits every woman unless you're dead and you die before it, right? So every, you know, male VC that we get in front of, they're going to resonate with it. And whether it's their mom, their aunt, their sister, and they think back like, wow, my mom was a raging bitch during that time, or she didn't sleep and she was completely crazy. It was, you know, I think it hits home and their ears perk up. And I happen to feel that there has, in the past few years, there's been a lot of VCs and angel investors that are really focused and honed in on FemTech alone and looking for, you know, disruptive products. And let's be honest, you know, the VCs, their end goal is return on investment. So why would they not want to invest in a FemTech products in an industry that's valued at that? And it's been hardly tapped into. I mean, I'm not in finance, but to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. So
I also want to say, women in menopause in 10 years, they will be what we call like chief scientific officers for every household, because women decide which healthcare. When there is $10 spent on healthcare, women decide about 9. And most of them are perimenopause or menopausal women. It's a big spending force. It's not just like, oh, you know, like there's a lot of women in that space. But it's like they are the decision makers for your industry.
The average woman spends $20,000 a year on their perimenopause symptoms. because they're just, whether they're getting supplements, going to the doctor, seeing the sleeping doctor, having joint pain and going through testing and MRIs because they think they have some rheumatoid problem or an autoimmune disease, it adds up and they don't realize that. And it's legitimate, and there's just a lot of data for actually these VCs to even see it, even as far as you look it back into employer solutions for menopause benefits. If you pull data and see the highest when the premiums go for employers, you're going to see that it's around that like 40 to 55 range for their employees where their spouses are on the plan. So there's a lot of information and data for VCs to actually be like, wait a minute, we've been doing FinTech for so long and all these other different industries, and a lot of people come to us and say, oh, it's really hard raising right now. But that doesn't scare us, myself and my co-founder, because we're very confident in what we're doing for women and the carve out of this industry. And the market actually needs more in women's health, and there's so much room for growth and for investors to make money.
I'll actually even add a tidbit that surprises a lot of people. Some of the biggest demographic of purchasers for our Linus vibrator is the 50 plus community, and they're the ones that are actually doing the most amount of spreading word of mouth. And they're like, so we get a lot of emails of people being like, hey, me and my girlfriends had brunch today, I got everyone to buy one, and then we all like show each other the data, what we've learned. And so I think it's also just realizing that that is a huge group that is typically very underrepresented. So yeah, I always like to tell people like the 50 plus community are the people that are our biggest supporters, and it's been the most important part of our business.
Yeah, I think it's like when at that age, women are comfortable in who they are and what they want for sex and their desires and fantasies and how they want their health and to live life and really just build their own narrative, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that kind of is a great transition, and Anna kind of touched on this already about the stigmas and taboos. I think, for a long time, women weren't talking about these things and weren't comfortable talking about these things. So, the impact was there were no discussions happening, and then how do you advertise for stuff like that? Because there are blocks in the way as we're trying to advertise these things. So how are you breaking those taboos and stigmas down? Are you tiptoeing around them, or are you going at them full force?
Okay, so my product vibrates, is a clear product, so it's a medical product, but it vibrates, fine. It looks like a sex toy, fine. It has good user experience, fine. But when you put it on social media, women are like, oh wow, wait, what is this? It takes down, like Facebook takes it down, Instagram takes it down, TikTok hates it. LinkedIn, wait for it, LinkedIn takes it down. And at one point I was so pissed. I was like, this is not fair. You put so much money in clinical research, you get it cleared, you put it out, you put like good user experience so women actually can experience a medical product nicely. And then these companies that don't understand anything about us, they just take it down because they have AI for recognition of adult products. So at one point I was so pissed that I actually created a petition against this biases in advertising, which was signed by almost 100 founders in the women's health and sex tech space, because it's not okay. And when I got the leverage of all the women founders coming together and talking, we can't talk menopause, we can't talk breastfeeding, we can't talk orgasms, we can't talk anything. Nipple is a forbidden word. Like, no. So I put together an examples of men's health ads where companies advertise male erection, help with male libido, and who knows what. And I was like, this is allowed. Breastfeeding, menopause, endometriosis, not allowed. Do something with it. And we did a press release, and then finally the big tech companies started to talk to me. And I talked to a guy who was from Instagram, and he was running their advertising, and I was like, you are constantly censoring us. It's not okay. Why do you censor us? And he told me, because we didn't know. Those AI recognition tools were built to recognize porn or who knows what. But because we look like sex toys, or because engineers, mostly male, they think orgasm is something dirty, then they automatically ban it. So Instagram started to work on a tool to remove the censorship. Facebook started to, like Facebook, Instagram, the same thing. Google also enabled us finally to advertise. The companies that are still evil, okay? LinkedIn, TikTok, and Amazon. They don't collaborate with us. They just didn't do anything. When we sell on Amazon, we have to show the box without the product. So we just like say the benefits, but we don't display the products, yet we make a lot of revenue on Amazon. But Amazon doesn't let us advertise the product when we show the product. So I think many of the companies, they just don't know. They don't do it intentionally that they would ban us, except TikTok that does it intentionally. But the others, they just didn't know. But we did a long way in this. We still have to crack TikTok and LinkedIn, and then and Amazon, and then we'll make it. But I think like for you, it's even more difficult.
Yeah, I would say for us, we didn't have a traditional growth trajectory of like any like B2C product that's especially in hardware, because we can't do advertisements. So we've never used Facebook ads, Google ads, or anything like that. Sex toys are still banned, and at the end of the day, this still looks like a rabbit-style vibrator. So no matter how much tech integration we have, data, how much we work with researchers to expand the research, we're still not doing advertisements to this day. So it's definitely still a challenge. I don't know what the solution is beyond just every time we do these kinds of things, we always talk about how much Meta, how strict it is, TikTok, and all of those things. But for us, it really has just been the one advantage I would say that we use is that sex sells at the end of the day. Like people are curious about how people have sex, what's out there, and all of these things. So we tend to get very organic press coverage very often. So that's been really nice for us to being like, hey, there's these engineers that are building this smart vibrator. But I think now it's only fun. It's just funny now, just all the times we get told no. Like we just can't take it as a personal thing, or like we just understand like that's just where the world is in terms of how taboo this topic is. Like CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, the first year we applied, they're like, we are not allowed to do sex toys, and we're like, we're doing a biofeedback device that has 6 sensor integrations, that's doing data with AI, that pairs to an app. What makes it different from a smartwatch? And so they obviously did the trial run, and it was extremely successful for them. And then now they have sex toys at CES, which is a huge kind of step. But it's just constantly seeing these like little changes. But I think really the answer is just constantly challenging it. And for us, the beauty is that because we have the data portion, we a lot of times show the data of our product. So this is what orgasm data looks like. This is what happens when you have alcohol or caffeine, how the orgasm and arousal changes. Maybe post-pregnancy, post-menopause, how the data changes. And then also because we're publishing research papers, so very recently we just published a paper with Dr. Jim Faust in the Journal of Sexual Medicine on how there's different orgasm patterns. And so seeing how things like that and pushing that research forward, that's been like the biggest channel for us to push kind of in terms of advertising. Not specifically the sex toy, but the research portion. And then also things like we had an athlete who had a concussion, and she saw her data flatline. And so showing that data difference and people being like, what is the thing that's collecting this data, and bringing that curiosity in. But we've definitely had to go, I think my team's probably one of the most creative teams I've known in this lifetime to figure out all the roundabout ways to be able to kind of push the word out there without ever having to say sex toys, vibrators, or showing our product, which is an incredible feat.
Yeah, I think we should finally dissociate porn and sex toys. Sex toys and orgasm is it's a health issue.
Yeah.
Porn is something else. And
that
they bracket you in the same bucket, it's horrible.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, so for us, menopause has been taboo for decades. Women it's a phase of their life, and doctors are not trained and educated on menopause. It's an elective, and they're certainly not really, they're learning about the longevity phase of medicine, which we like to call medicine 3.0, but it hasn't been openly spoken about, right? You have to kind of deal with it, you get through it, you'll get through a phase of life. And with us, our biggest is our Meta, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and that's really our big source of getting through to women in our demographic, 40 to 55, 58, with openly speaking about perimenopause, menopause symptoms, having information out there, the ability for them to book online. We have a lot of like information sessions and Instagram live events, and I think that is our biggest advocate and our growth marketing engine to really tackle that taboo of people not talking about it, because luckily that is okay in the meta world to talk about the menopause, and so really just conquering everything that's happened with WHI studies and hormone therapy being bad, which is completely taboo and not false. Not true. And that's really where, we go with the taboo aspect of it.
So what do you perceive as the greatest challenges in women's health innovation in the next 5 years?
I still think it's funding. It's not just funding from VC investors, but I also think like research grants are still not there. Mm-hmm. That's also what we saw when we were applying for research grants. It's still not prioritized enough. That's what I think.
I think the challenge is continuing to get people aware of this industry and what the big gap is. I think a lot of times even if I just say like, did you know that sex toys are historically a male-dominated industry, or that for every 7 papers there are about male sexual function, there's 1 paper on female sexual function? I think it surprises people how big that gap is, and I think it's just constantly educating and having people realize that in 2023 we still know so little and we have so little representation for women's health. Like when we talk to OB-GYNs, like OB-GYNs get the very small hours of training in sexual function. Yeah. And so it's not even part of like a doctor's job to be able to educate you on if something's not right, something's painful during sex. Like it's not part of that narrative. And so I think it's just the challenge is constantly pushing the narrative of that, how big this gap is, that I think a lot of times we often don't realize. And so every time I think I'm like, oh, it's so obvious, and I realize it's because I'm in this world so deep for the past 8 years. So I think it's just constantly getting out there. And then in my thing is like, because I'm in a sexual pleasure space, like it's just constantly destigmatizing sexual pleasure, and that pleasure is a human right, like to be able to experience pleasure just as much as you're eating and breathing, and how important that is for so many people's lives. So I think it's the constant education portion. I think it's still the biggest gap of just, and also just like, taking the taboo away of like, women's bodies are not scary.
Yeah, and I also think that people woke up to the fact that FemTech, fertility issues, but fertility issues like this part. Yeah. FemTech is this. And I'm still waiting until they wake up to the fact that there are other conditions, not that tied to having babies, that we experience are very different from men. And it also big problems. It's not just making babies. That's not the number one problem that every woman has. Sometimes it is, but not always. There are so many other opportunities in women's health space that are completely untouched.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is going to have continuing community and resources of FemTech companies collaborating and coming together for new creative and innovative ideas to be progressive. I think that one of the challenges that concerns us at FemJavity is like the access to really good product engineers that can help you build out your system and that actually believe in your mission and vision and aren't just there for a seat and a paycheck, but actually are there for the journey and the ride with you. And a lot of those are very male dominated. So to be able to find someone that shares your vision and can build out what your plan is and how you want to impact your consumers and just execute. So.
And what is one thing that today's audience can do to make a difference in women's health?
Buy our products.
That's a good one.
Just support. Like, you don't have to buy my products. You don't have don't have problems. But there's so many women's companies. If you don't want to buy their products, share their tweets,
share sex tech, like share articles about it, like talk about it. That's the least thing you can do. If you can't buy, like at least talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's just I think on a product standpoint, just realizing how little products there are to help cater for women's needs. So I don't know, even just walking around this conference being like, how can this sensor be integrated? So I would say like the coolest thing has been the sensor that we use to measure involuntary pelvic floor contractions. Like I would have never thought that sensor company would have been the thing that we use, but I was reading a research paper, how they use this in a research facility, how they're measuring pelvic floor contractions. And I was like, I've worked with sensors before. I've known like 4 sensors that are out there. And so it's going out to these vendors and being like, hey, we're working on this product. And I think we terrified a lot of our vendors because they're like, we've never worked on a sex toy before and things like that. But it's just kind of going out there to realize like, what if we thought of this as another consumer device, just like a tablet or whatever, and then just seeing what kind of possibilities are out there to create new products. I think that's the exciting part.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of getting women and men also comfortable with talking about female issues and how to not just be a subpar patriarchal society and really allow us to spread our wings and be more open about female issues, whether it's sexual health, fertility, libido loss, perimenopause, and forward those articles, like support each other and allow it to be open, because without everybody out there talking and forwarding information, it's very hard to grow and to really saturate the world with information on women's health and innovation.
So it sounds like support.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
In many ways. We have a couple minutes left. Thank you so much for your responses. I would like to open it up to our audience. Are there any questions for any of our panelists? Don't be shy, it's okay. Don't be shy.
You can ask about the vibrators or sexual health.
I know, we didn't show the little
You can
spice.
raise your hand and tell us you're having hot flashes. I'm having cold
great.
sweats.
No one?
For the pelvic floor sensor, is a medical device?
No, so sex toys are unfortunately not FDA regulated. So what we are doing is a sex toy that has biofeedback data. So we're not diagnosing anything. What we're doing is similar to Fitbit, is just giving biofeedback data and how that changes your pleasure over time. So we've seen things like coffee, alcohol, concussion, stress, and all those things have different factors. But we're giving people a tool for self-experimentation. We're not diagnosing. So we're currently not FDA regulated.
Great
Which is a
question.
whole
Thank
other
you.
topic too, is why isn't it regulated? It should absolutely be regulated, I agree.
All right.
Hello, thank you for your talks. For those who are making products, could you talk more about the sensors that you're using and any specific challenges that you're having with the sensors right now that you're looking for, like specific solutions for?
In our case, the bottleneck in productions are, we use impedance, so are like the golden plated electrodes. It's because the process, they have to be of really high quality, so we have a very specific process how we make them. And that's the bottleneck for our expansion, because we can only make a certain number a month. But apart from that, during COVID, everyone had problems with components and so on. Our contract manufacturer was so smart that when the COVID started to hit in Wuhan, they bought all our components for all year up front, so we didn't have a component shortage problem. But this one, we are currently solving how to make them and produce them on a scale. But I think it's a time issue only. We will be able to do it.
Yeah, I would say so. For us, we have 2 force sensors. We use FSRs, so that's what's measuring your vaginal contractions. And then we have an accelerometer gyroscope to detect movement. A lot of times what we're doing is removing that noise. So if you're thrusting or anything like that, we don't want to collect that data. What we want to collect is your pelvic floor contractions strictly. And then on this, we have a silver button on the back. That's the temperature sensor. So we're also checking how the temperature changes. Also using it as an automatic trigger to start recording data. So if I turn it on like this, it's not recording any of this data because that's junk data. So only when it's inserted into the body and it detects a temperature change, it's going to start detecting those contractions. I would say the biggest practical challenge is absolutely like sourcing and then getting, especially as a small company when we first started, we were trying to make 1,000 of these units. Most vendors that are huge vendors are like, that's good for you, go get it on, Mouse or Arrow, things like that. But you need, for us, what we realized is that we needed vendor buy-ins or like these people's buy-ins really, really early on so they can actually give us feedback and understanding how to integrate these properly. So I think that was a really big challenge. And then with the pandemic, the shortages that happened was a really chaotic situation for all of us. But I would say the other thing for us is like doing women's health products for sensor integration. The hardest thing was actually figuring out what the correct baseline was and doing data because there are so little research studies from the past. So actually even figuring out like, are we collecting the right data and where do the sensors need to sit so that we're collecting the pelvic floor contractions from the best place possible. All of those things were so limited in that research, it was really hard to actually even start building prototypes. So I would say it took us 4 years to develop our very first product, and it was because we were hand building all these prototypes and just giving it out to people, because the answers that I would say should typically be given, and like, if you're building a watch or anything like that, where the sensors need to sit, that data didn't exist for sexual health.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.